A folded paper slipped from a borrowed silver glove and landed on the marble floor of the Ashworth ballroom between two pairs of dancing shoes. Cecily Graves did not see it fall. She was 21 and had never worn silver before, and she was watching the candles instead of her hands. The man in the black mask saw it. He had not attended a ball in 2 years, and he had bent for no woman since he had bent over his wife's body on their wedding night. He bent now, picked the paper up, and read the title. The 7 Proofs That Love is a Lie. He looked up. The girl in the silver domino was already walking away through the crowd, towards the terrace doors, her shoulders held very straight. He followed her. He caught her elbow on the threshold. The air outside smelled of cold roses and lamp oil. She turned, and through the slits of her mask her eyes were the colour of weak tea, and they were not frightened. They were tired. "I believe you dropped this," he said. She looked at the paper. She looked at his glove. She did not reach for it. "It is not mine," she said. "It is. The handwriting matches the inscription inside your dance card. I saw it earlier when you set the card down and did not pick it back up." She said nothing. "Who hurt you enough to write this?" he said. "That did it." She reached. He held the paper a moment longer than he needed to before he gave it back. "You are Harrogate," she said. "Lady Ashworth pointed you out behind her fan." "Then you have the advantage of me." "Cecily Graves. I am Lady Ashworth's companion." He inclined his head. He did not let her go. "I should like to know what the other 6 proofs are, Miss Graves." "Why?" "Because I wrote a similar list 2 years ago. Mine had only 1 proof on it. Yours has 6 more, which means you are either braver than I am, or more determined to be wrong." She looked at him for a long moment. The music inside swelled and broke. "I am not wrong," she said. "Then prove it," he said. "I will fund every experiment on this list, but you test them with me. No one else." She laughed once, soundless behind her mask. It was the first time she had laughed in a year. "That is not how a proof works, Your Grace." "It is how this one will work," he said. "Come to Harrogate House at 11 on Tuesday. Bring the list." He bowed and left her on the terrace with the folded paper crumpling slowly in her hand. In his own carriage going home, he did not lean back against the seat. He sat forward with his hat in his hands and watched the lamps of Mayfair pass without seeing them, and he could remember the 7 lines on the list as exactly as if he were still holding it. He could also remember the shape of her mouth saying, "I am not wrong," and somewhere between Hanover Square and his own door he understood, in a way he had been trying not to understand for some time, that he had been waiting for 2 years for someone to set him a problem he could actually solve. He had not solved Helena, and he could perhaps solve this, and he was 29 years old, and he had not, until tonight, thought of himself as a man with anything left to spend. He did not sleep until 5 in the morning. When he slept, it was without dreams for the first time since his wife had been buried, and he woke at 9 and asked for paper, and he wrote 2 letters. One to a man in Bury St Edmunds whom he had used for inquiries before, and one to his solicitor, and he sealed them both himself. The morning after the masquerade, Cecily was on her knees behind the chaise longue in Lady Ashworth's drawing-room, sorting unpaid bills into one stack and unread invitations into another. She had been sorting other people's papers since she was 11 years old. Her father, the Reverend Mr. Graves of Sotterley, had taught her the work and praised her for it, and that was the part she could not bear to remember. She had found him in the vestry on a Wednesday afternoon in March. She had been 12. The churchwarden's wife had been 41. Cecily had stood in the doorway holding the new hymn books her father had asked her to fetch, and she had understood, in the way that children understand things they should not, exactly what she was looking at. She had walked back to the vicarage. She had told her mother. Her mother had not looked up from the mending. "I have known for 10 years, Cecily," her mother had said. "Put the hymn books in the hall." Cecily had put the hymn books in the hall. She had eaten supper. She had not said another word at that table about it, and her mother had not said another word about it ever, and her father had continued to preach about the holy estate of matrimony every Sunday for the next 9 years, until Cecily had packed one trunk and walked out of the vicarage at 20. She did not write to them. They did not write to her. Lady Ashworth, an old friend of Cecily's grandmother, had taken her in as a paid companion at £30 a year, which was £1 more than the wages of the second housemaid and £1 less than the wages of the cook, and which Cecily considered a fair description of her place in the world. The trunk she had brought from the vicarage was still under her bed. Inside it were 2 muslin dresses, a small notebook in which she recorded the things she observed about other people's marriages, and a packet of letters her mother had kept and never opened. Letters from women who had written to her mother for help over the years and never received it. Cecily had taken the letters because she could not leave them. She did not yet know why. Lady Ashworth came in with the air of a woman who had been thinking. She was 76 and walked with a cane and used the cane as one might use a sword. "My dear," she said, "you danced once last night with Harrogate. The whole room saw it." Cecily stood up. He returned a paper I had dropped. "He has not danced with anyone for 2 years. He has not even been in a ballroom for 2 years. Whatever you dropped, he picked up. I should like to know what it was." "A list." "Of?" "Reasons." Lady Ashworth waited. "Reasons love is a lie," Cecily said. Lady Ashworth sat down in the chaise longue Cecily had been working behind. She set the cane against her knee. "How many reasons?" "7." "And he asked to see the other 6. "He has asked me to come to Harrogate House on Tuesday at 11. Lady Ashworth considered her. She did not speak for some time. "Cecily," she said at last, "I have known 3 Dukes of Harrogate. The grandfather was a brute. The father was a fool. This one is neither. His wife died at the wedding breakfast. He lifted her out of her chair himself and carried her up the stairs and stayed by her bed until the physician came down at 11:30 that night and told him she was gone. He has not entered a room with music in it since. I do not know what you wrote on your list, but I know what he is asking. He is asking for someone to take him out of a room he has been alone in for 2 years. Go on Tuesday." "He frightens me." "Good," said Lady Ashworth. "Then you are paying attention. She wore the grey muslin on Tuesday because she had nothing else, and she walked to Harrogate House from Lady Ashworth's because she had no money for a cab and would not borrow it. The butler did not blink at her dress. The footman did not blink at her gloves. They led her into a library lined floor to ceiling with books she had read about in catalogues and never seen. The Duke of Harrogate was standing at the window with his back to her. He was tall in a way she had not registered behind the mask, and he was thinner than a man his age should be, and his coat was very plain. "Miss Graves," he said without turning, "sit down. Tea is coming. I will not ask you about the weather." She sat. The tea came. He sat opposite her. His eyes were grey and looked at her without softening and without sharpening, and she understood that he had probably looked at everyone exactly this way for 2 years. He held out his hand. She gave him the list. He read it through twice. He set it down on the table between them. "The first proof," he said, "that a man flatters a debutante in the same words he flatters her sister 3 minutes later, easily tested at any garden party in June. The second, that a marriage proposal is always preceded by an inquiry into the lady's settlement, easily tested through any solicitor of my acquaintance. The third, that a woman's name is forgotten the moment she ceases to be the most beautiful in the room, tested by attending the opera. The fourth, that long marriages are silent ones, tested at a dinner. The fifth, that a society lady will sacrifice a friend to protect her own standing, tested at any ball where the standing is in doubt. The sixth, that a man's love speech is performance, tested by listening. The seventh," he paused, "the seventh is the one I cannot fund." She waited. "You require, for the 7th proof, witnessing a man sacrifice something real for a woman and receive nothing in return. I can pay for the first 6 experiments. I cannot pay for the 7th. The 7th you will have to find on your own." "I have looked," she said. "I have not found one." "Then perhaps that proof has already been decided in your favour, and you are simply unwilling to admit it." She did not answer this. "Here are my terms," he said. "I will provide gowns, transport, introductions and access. You will attend each event with me. We will observe together, and we will compare notes. You will tell me, after each proof, what your evidence shows. You will not test these proofs with any other man. You will not accept gifts from any other man. You will not accept invitations from any other man without consulting me first. In exchange, I will give you, at the end of the 7th proof, a settlement of £300. Whether your list is proved or disproved, the settlement stands." £300 was 10 years of her wages. "Why?" she said. He looked at the list on the table. He looked at her. "Because I wrote my own list 2 years ago," he said. Mine had one proof on it, and I could not test it. I would like to test yours. What was your proof? That a woman cannot die for a lie her family told. I have not yet succeeded in proving it false. She picked up the teacup. She put it down again without drinking. I accept, she said. Tuesday next week, he said. Lord Carrington's garden party. Proof 1. I will send a gown on Thursday. Do not refuse it. She stood and he stood with her, and he did not bow and she did not curtsy. They were already past it. At the door she stopped. Your Grace. Yes. Why no other man? He looked at her for what felt like a long time. Because if you take this list to another man, he said, he will lie to you and call it gallantry. I will not lie to you. That is my one advantage. She left. He stood at the window for an hour after she had gone, holding the list, not reading it. The gown arrived on Thursday in a box larger than her trunk. It was muslin too, but a finer muslin than Cecily had seen in her life, and it was the colour of new cream. A note was pinned to it. I have purchased 4, one for each of the first 4 proofs. The 5th and the 6th will be sent in due course. Harrowgate. Lady Ashworth examined the dress with the air of a magistrate. He has paid attention to what suits you, she said. That is either a courtesy or an investment. Time will tell which. At Lord Carrington's garden party, Cecily wore the cream muslin and a borrowed straw bonnet and Harrowgate's arm. The garden was full of women in pinks and yellows and men leaning towards them with the same set of phrases. Cecily and Harrowgate stood beside a hedge of lavender and listened. Miss Elliot, the colour of that ribbon suits your complexion entirely. 3 minutes later, 2 paces along the hedge. Miss Forrester, the colour of that ribbon suits your complexion entirely. Cecily wrote in her notebook. Proof 1, confirmed in 8 minutes. Harrowgate did not smile. He nodded once. They moved on. At the opera, the box opposite theirs was occupied by Lord and Lady Selby. They had been married 5 years. Lord Selby spent the entire first act watching the soprano's mouth. Lady Selby spent it watching her own gloved hands. In the interval, he left the box to speak with another man. Lady Selby remained. He has forgotten her name tonight, Cecily said. He has not forgotten it. He has chosen not to use it. There is a difference. You are defending him. I am being precise. Proof 3 requires forgetting. This is colder than forgetting. She wrote, Proof 3 confirmed by a colder mechanism than predicted. Harrowgate corrects my hypothesis. At the Charity Musicale, Lady Thornbury was on the door of the chamber. She was perhaps 40, sharp-faced, and she wore a turban with 3 feathers in it that did not quite suit her. She greeted Harrowgate by name. She looked at Cecily for a long second. I do not believe I have had the pleasure, she said. Miss Graves, said Harrowgate, Lady Ashworth's companion, my guest tonight. Miss Graves, said Lady Thornbury. Graves, Graves, the name is familiar. Are you connected to the Sussex Graveses? No, said Cecily. To the Norfolk Graveses, then? No. How extraordinary. Welcome, Miss Graves. In the carriage afterwards, Harrowgate said, She will look for you. She does not forget a face she cannot place. Let her look. He did not answer. The dinner with the Frobishers was given in their narrow house in Curzon Street on a wet Thursday in late June. There were 14 at table. Mrs. Frobisher seated Cecily on her own left, 2 places from Harrowgate, and Cecily understood as soon as the soup arrived that Mrs. Frobisher had thought about this seating for some time. The Frobishers had been married 31 years. They did not speak across the table to each other once during the first 3 courses, and they did not look at each other either. Cecily had come prepared for proof 4 to confirm itself in the silence, and the silence was being provided for her without any effort on her part, and she ought to have been pleased. She was not pleased. She watched Mrs. Frobisher's left hand and Mr. Frobisher's right hand all through the soup and the fish and the venison. She watched them lift glasses and refold napkins, and accept salt and decline pepper, and set down forks at angles she would not have noticed in any other woman's drawing-room. Neither hand drifted. Neither hand reached. She began to feel a small, bright resentment rising in her chest at her own hypothesis, which appeared, this evening, to be inarguable, and the resentment was, she realized after a moment, the first piece of evidence she had ever gathered against her own list. At the 3rd remove, the candles guttered briefly in a draught from the hall, and the room dimmed, and Mrs. Frobisher's left hand slipped under the linen at the same instant that Mr. Frobisher's right hand met it from his side. They linked under the tablecloth without either of them looking down or pausing in the conversation they were having with their separate neighbours, and they remained linked until the cloth was drawn at the end of the meal. Not one of the 12 other guests at that table saw it. Cecily, because she had been watching for it without knowing she was watching for it, saw it. So did Harrogate, who had been watching her watching. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to a small parlour, and Mrs. Frobisher, who had not addressed Cecily by anything other than her name all evening, came and sat beside her on a sofa upholstered in faded green silk. "My dear," she said quietly, "I do not know what you and the Duke are doing tonight, and I do not need to know. I should like only to tell you that we have been married for 31 years, and for 19 of them I did not believe my husband loved me. I was mistaken. It took me 19 years to understand that the way he loves is in his hand under the tablecloth, and not in his speech at the head of it. I tell you this because you have a watchful face, and I should not like you to spend 19 years in the same mistake. That is all." She rose before Cecily could shape any answer and went to ring for the tea. In the carriage home, Cecily sat with the closed notebook in her lap and did not open it. Harrogate did not ask her what she had written. He had been watching her face since they left the door, and he had stopped expecting her to write. "You did not record it," he said at last. "No." "Why?" She turned the notebook over in her hands and turned it back. "Because I do not know what to record. If I write that they touched hands, the entry refutes proof 4. If I write that nobody at the table saw them touch, the entry confirms a different proof I have not written down yet, which is that the people in a long marriage stop performing it for any audience, including themselves. I do not know yet which entry is the honest one." He looked out at the lamplight passing across the window glass. A muscle moved at the corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile, and she saw it. "Set proof 4 aside," he said. "It is not the proof you came to test tonight." "What proof did I come to test tonight?" "Whether you wanted your list to be true." She did not answer this. The carriage went on. She set the notebook beside her on the seat and did not pick it up again before they reached Lady Ashworth's door. 3 days later, she arrived at Harrogate House half an hour early, because she had walked rather than ride, and had misjudged the time. The footman led her to the morning room and excused himself. The Duke was not yet there, or so the footman thought. But Harrogate was there, in a chair by the cold grate, alone, holding a small enamelled miniature between his hands. He was not weeping. He was not reading. He was simply looking at the face inside the case. Cecily stepped back into the corridor and did not let him see her. She did not write that down either. But she understood then that the 7th proof was a problem she had set herself, and the Duke of Harrogate was a problem someone else had set him, and that the 2 problems had wandered into the same room by accident and might not leave it as they had come. Proof 5 required a ball at which a society lady's standing might plausibly be in doubt. Harrogate chose the Countess of Thornbury's autumn assembly because Lady Thornbury was the kind of hostess for whom standing was never anywhere but in doubt. He sent a 5th gown. It was darker than the cream, a soft grey blue, the colour of a slate roof in rain. It fit Cecily as though it had been cut on her. She did not ask how he had her measurements. She suspected Lady Ashworth. They arrived at 9:30. The Thornbury ballroom was vast and very bright and full of people who had read of Harrogate's name in the papers for 2 years and never expected to see him in a room again. The talk dipped as he entered with Cecily on his arm. The talk did not pick back up at the same volume. Lady Thornbury met them at the second pillar. "Your Grace, Miss Graves, how lovely." Lady Thornbury. "I had wondered, Miss Graves, whether you might dance the second set with my nephew. He is in the cavalry." "Miss Graves dances with me," said Harrogate. "The first set, the second set, and the supper set." "How modern of you, Your Grace," said Lady Thornbury, and she withdrew, and Cecily understood, and Harrogate understood, that something had been decided in Lady Thornbury's mind in the half a second between her first sentence and her second. The first set passed. The second set began. They were halfway through the figure when Lady Thornbury walked into the centre of the floor and held up one hand. The music stopped because the leader of the band knew his hostess. "My dear friends," she said in a voice pitched to reach the gallery, "I have been so amused tonight I cannot keep it to myself. The Duke of Harrogate has brought us a guest, Miss Cecily Graves. I have made inquiries today. I should like to share them." Harrogate's hand on Cecily's waist did not move. Cecily's other hand, in his, did not move. They were standing very still in the centre of the floor, and the music had stopped. Miss Graves is not, as you may have assumed, of the Sussex Graveses, nor of the Norfolk Graveses. Miss Graves is the daughter of a country parson, not a gentleman in orders, a village parson in a Suffolk parish of 300 souls. She left her father's house at 20 without a settlement, and works as paid companion to dear Lady Ashworth at a wage I shall not name. She is the daughter of nobody, and the relation of nobody, and we have all of us ladies been dancing tonight with the Duke of Harrogate's little experiment. I thought you should know. The room did not move. 300 guests held a breath that did not quite break. A footman dropped a tray of glasses by the door. The sound went through the silence like a stone through a window. A woman near the orchestra made a small noise behind her fan and bit it off. The colour drained from Mrs. Frobisher's face. Lady Ashworth, in her place by the wall, drew her cane an inch closer and lifted her chin. Cecily did not weep. She did not flinch. She turned her head 1/4 towards Lady Thornbury and looked at her with her tired, tea-coloured eyes. "I never claimed to be otherwise, Lady Thornbury," she said. She turned her head back to Harrogate. "Will you take me out, Your Grace? I find the room over-warm." He took her out. The crowd parted without a word. Lady Ashworth followed. In the carriage, neither of them spoke for a long minute. The horses moved off, and Cecily put her hands in her lap and did not look at him. "Proof 5, she said. "Confirmed." "Cecily?" "It is confirmed. A society lady will sacrifice a friend to protect her own standing. Lady Thornbury did not need me out of that room. She wanted me out. There is a difference. Proof 5, confirmed. We may move on to proof 6. Cecily, look at me." She looked at him. Her eyes were dry and they were furious, and not at him. "I do not need a defender, Your Grace. I have stood in rooms where worse things were said and held my hymn books. I am perfectly intact." "Marry me," he said. The carriage went on for several seconds before she could put her tongue around any word. "That is not a proof on the list." "Marry me, Cecily. Then no one can remove you from any room. Then Lady Thornbury cannot announce anything about you that she has not first asked your permission to say. Marry me, and you become a duchess, and Suffolk vicars' daughters do not get announced out of ballrooms after that. You can finish your list. You can keep your notebook. You can refuse me at the end if all 7 proofs hold. I will sign whatever paper you wish. Marry me as a matter of strategy." "You do not propose to me as a matter of strategy." "I do not yet propose to you as anything else, because you would not believe me." The carriage stopped at Lady Ashworth's door. Cecily put her hand on the door before the footman could. "Give me 3 days," she said. "You have 3 days." She went up the steps with Lady Ashworth, and she did not look back, and Harrogate did not move from the carriage until the door had shut behind her. She did not weep on the stair, and she did not weep at her bedroom door, and she did not weep when Lady Ashworth came up at 1 o'clock in the morning and sat down on the edge of the bed without speaking. She had not lit a candle. She was sitting on the floor with her back to the bedpost and her arms around her knees, in the grey-blue silk that did not belong to her, and her face was perfectly dry and perfectly still, and Lady Ashworth saw at once that this was the worst sign of all. "Cecily." "I cannot get the dress off," Cecily said, in a voice that came from very far inside her. "I cannot reach the laces, and I will not call the housemaid. Will you unlace me?" Lady Ashworth unlaced her, and the dress fell, and Cecily stood in her shift and her stays and looked at the dress on the floor as though she had never seen it before. "She was right," Cecily said, "about every word. I am the daughter of a country parson. I have no settlement. I work for £30 a year. None of it is untrue. He's going to marry me to mend it, and he's going to wake up one morning in a year or two and look at me across the breakfast table and see that he has married a vicar's daughter in good linen, and I am going to be in the room when he sees it. Cecily, I cannot do it. I cannot watch him do it." "You cannot watch him do what?" "Realise he has bought a forgery." Lady Ashworth sat on the bed with her hands on her cane and looked at the girl in her shift, and there was a long silence during which Cecily finally began to cry. She cried without sound for a long time. Lady Ashworth did not move from the bed, and she did not say anything either. When Cecily had stopped, Lady Ashworth handed her a clean handkerchief from her own sleeve and waited until Cecily had used it. "You are not a forgery, Cecily. You are a young woman with a list. The list is wrong about him, and you know it, and that is why you cannot bear that he proposed in the carriage. He did not propose to repair your standing. He proposed because he saw you stand in that room and not break, and a man who has watched a woman die at his own wedding breakfast knows what it costs to stand in a room and not break. He proposed to you for the only reason he had left in the world. You are not the one who needs 3 days to think. He is. Give him the 3 days, spend them sleeping, then go. She picked up the grey-blue silk from the floor and folded it over the back of the chair, and she put the candle on the table, and she kissed Cecily on the forehead, which she had not done since Cecily had arrived in the house, and she went out. Cecily lay down on the bed in her shift and slept for the first time in 2 days. For 3 days, Cecily did not write in her notebook. She turned the proposal in her hands the way she had turned the list. She talked to Lady Ashworth in the small drawing room with the door shut. "It is a cage," she said. "Every marriage is a cage," said Lady Ashworth. "The question is whether you choose the bars yourself, or whether someone hammers them in around you while you are sleeping. He is offering you the hammer. Take it. Hammer it however you wish." "I do not love him." "Then do not pretend to. Marry him on the terms he offered. Finish your list. If at the end of it your list still holds, leave. He has said he will let you. He is not the sort of man who lies to women on purpose." "He has lied to himself for 2 years." "That is a different thing." On the 3rd day she went to Harrogate House. She did not wear the grey-blue gown. She wore the muslin she had worn the first day, the day she had had nothing else. She wanted him to remember what he was choosing. He received her in the same library. The list was on the same table. He did not stand at the window this time. He stood by the fire. "I will marry you," she said, "on 3 conditions. 1, I keep my notebook. 2, I keep my freedom to refuse you at the end of the 7th proof, and the proof must be honestly conducted to its end. 3, you tell me today why you have not been in a ballroom for 2 years. Not because I have heard the story from Lady Ashworth, because I would like to hear it from you." He was silent. He looked at the fire. "I married Helena Vaughan on the 11th of June, 2 years ago," he said. "She was 23. We had known each other since we were children. I knew she tired easily. I did not know her heart had been seen by 3 physicians in the year before our wedding, and that each one had said she should not marry, and that her father had paid each one £100 not to put the diagnosis in writing. The settlement was already drawn. The estates were already joined. The wedding went forward. She collapsed during the toast to our health. She did not regain consciousness. The physician arrived at 4. She died at 23 minutes past 11 that night. Her father was downstairs eating a cold supper. I have not spoken to him since." He stopped. He did not look at her. "The reason I have not been in a ballroom for 2 years is not grief. I want to be clear about this. The reason is that I will look at every father in every ballroom and wonder which one of them is selling a daughter. I have not wanted to be in a room where I could think that thought. I went to the Ashworth masquerade because Lady Ashworth wrote me a letter that said stop. So I went. And I picked up a piece of paper from the floor that said love was a lie. And it occurred to me that perhaps I had been arguing the wrong proof for 2 years. Perhaps my proof was not that a woman cannot die for a lie her family told. Perhaps my proof was that I had been the only one in the room who did not know what was being sold. That is a kind of proof. I would like to test it." The fire moved in the grate. He turned his head to her. "I will not propose marriage to you to protect you if I thought it was a cage, Cecily. I have stood in one for 2 years. I know exactly what they feel like. I am offering you the door." She crossed the room. She did not touch him. She stood close enough that he had to look at her. "I accept your 3 conditions in return for mine," she said. "We marry on Tuesday. We finish the list. We tell each other the truth even when it is inconvenient. We do not pretend." Agreed. They were married on Tuesday at St. Margaret's with Lady Ashworth and the steward and the housekeeper for witnesses, and there was no breakfast and no toast and no public notice in the papers for a week. In those 3 weeks, Mrs. Mallory, who had been housekeeper at Harrogate House for 11 years, watched the new Duchess and the Duke and kept her observations to herself. She had not been asked her opinion, and she did not give it. She had, however, on the evening of the 7th day, seen the Duke pass through the long gallery at 9:30 and stop in front of the small enamelled miniature of the late Helena Vaughan that had been left in its case on the mantel since the funeral. She had seen him pick the case up, close it, carry it the length of the gallery, and lay it down in the bottom drawer of the cabinet at the far end, among his late mother's letters. He had not looked at the case while he put it away. He had stood with his hand on the closed drawer for a long minute, and his face, which Mrs. Mallory had seen perform the work of running a great house for 2 years without expression, had been the face of a man putting down a weight he was no longer required to carry. Then he had gone upstairs to where his wife was. Mrs. Mallory had gone back to the linen cupboard and closed the door and not spoken of it to a soul. But she had cried for a quarter of an hour over the third shelf because she had cried for the late Duchess too, and had not known until that evening that she had also been carrying it. 3 weeks after the wedding, Cecily walked into the steward's office at Harrogate House to look for a missing inventory list. She did not find the inventory. She found a stack of receipts in a leather folder marked Sotterly. She did not mean to read them. She read them. The Reverend Mr. Graves of Sotterly owed £742 to a wine merchant in Bury St Edmunds. He owed £290 to a tailor in Norwich. He owed £68 to a horse dealer. He owed his housekeeper 4 months of unpaid wages. Each debt had been paid in the past 6 months in instalments. Each instalment had been paid by an anonymous banker's draft drawn on a private account at Coutts. Each draft was signed by hand. The hand was Harrogate's. She sat down on the floor of the steward's office. She read the file again. She read the dates. The first instalment had been paid 4 weeks after the masquerade. 4 weeks after he had picked up her list. 8 weeks before he had proposed marriage. He had been paying her father's debts before he had any reason to believe she would ever know. She sat on the floor for a long time. Then she carried the leather folder upstairs to the library and put it on the table next to her list. Harrogate came in at 5. He saw the folder. He stopped at the door. "How," she said, "did you know he had debts?" "I have a man in Bury. I had him make inquiries the morning after the masquerade. I had your name. The rest was straightforward." "Why?" "Because I did not want a man who had betrayed his daughter to also lose his parish. You would have blamed yourself for that in some way I do not yet understand, but I knew you would. So I paid the debts. He does not know who is paying them. He never will." "Why anonymously?" "Because if he knew it was me, he would write to you, and you would refuse him, and he would suffer for it, and you would blame yourself for that too. There is no version of him knowing that does not end in your pain, so he does not know." "You did this," she said, "before you proposed." "I did it because I thought I would never propose. I thought you would test your list and find it true and leave. I would rather pay his debts for the rest of my life than have him surface as a story in your life again." She looked at the list. She looked at the folder. She looked at him. "Proof 7, she said. Her voice was very steady and her hands were shaking. "Witness a man sacrifice something real for a woman and receive nothing in return." He did not understand for a moment. Then he did. "Cecily." "It fails," she said. "The list fails. The 7th proof fails. The whole list fails. Love is not a lie." She sat down, because her legs would not hold her up. Harrogate crossed the room and knelt by her chair, and did not touch her until she put her hand on his. She wept then. She wept for the first time since the day she had stood in the vestry doorway holding hymn books. She wept, and he did not speak, and after a long time her tears stopped, and she looked at him, with her eyes red and her face wet. "I'm going to take that woman down," she said. "Which woman?" "Lady Thornbury. I'm going to take her down at our autumn ball, in front of 300 people. I will need your help." "You have it." They did not begin the planning that night. He sat with her in the library until she stopped shaking, and then he carried the leather folder back to the steward's office himself and put it where she had found it and locked the drawer. And they did not speak of it again until the next morning at breakfast. She came down with a packet of letters under her arm. She had been awake since 4. The packet was tied in faded green ribbon, and she had cut the ribbon at 5, and read every letter through twice between 5 and 7. And when she sat down at the breakfast table, she put the packet beside her plate and laid one letter on top of it. "Mary Hudson," she said. "I do not know the name." "You do. She was a parson's daughter in Norwich in the year 1801. Her father died of typhus in the autumn, and she had no black gown to wear at his grave, and she wrote to my mother and asked for the loan of one. My mother did not answer the letter. The letter is here." She turned the page towards him. He read it. He had a face for reading letters that gave nothing away even to her, and she watched it do its work. "You have made a connection," he said at last. "I made it last night at 3. I could not sleep. I went down to the library and I read the 7 proofs through again, and I thought about every woman who had ever announced herself out of any room I had ever been in, and I thought of Lady Thornbury, and I knew before I knew that I knew. I went up to my dressing room and I untied the ribbon. The letter is the 3rd in the packet. The handwriting is a girl's hand. The hand in the visitor's book at Lady Thornbury's musicale in July is the same hand, 20 years older. I checked the upstroke of the H and the way she closes the loop on the lower G. I have a memory for hands. Mary Hudson married up. Mary Hudson married the heir to an earldom whose mother believed her to be the daughter of a respectable solicitor in Bath. Mary Hudson became Lady Thornbury. She made inquiries about me, Edmund, because she could not place my name. The reason she could not place my name is that she had spent 20 years working very hard not to know it. My mother's name is on the visiting card she sent to ask for the loan of a black gown. My mother's name was on the inside of her own head every time she announced me out of a ballroom. He folded the letter and laid it back on top of the packet. "What do you want to do?" "I want to invite her to our autumn ball. I want her to come in expecting to mock the parson's girl again. I want her to be in the room when you announce me as your wife. I want her to be in the room when my father comes through the door, which we both know he will, because he has had 3 weeks now to read of the marriage in the papers, and he has not yet learned how to stay away from a thing that might be turned to his advantage. He will come for the toast he was not invited to. I want the steward to remove him with absolute courtesy. I want Lord Thornbury to apologise because Lady Ashworth has had his confidence on the subject, quietly, twice, in her own drawing room since September, and we both know what he wants to do and has not yet done. And then I want to address Lady Thornbury directly in front of the room, and I want her to hear the name Mary Hudson spoken aloud for the first time in 20 years, and I want her to know that I am not going to publish the letter. I am only going to know it." He was silent. He looked at the letter on the table. "You have thought about this?" "I have thought about very little else since 6 o'clock this morning." "Why mercy on the letter?" "Because I am not my father. I am not my mother either. I do not want her destroyed in print. I want her removed from the rooms I am in. The letter is enough to do the second without doing the first. It will hold for the rest of her life. She will spend every evening from now until she dies, wondering whether tonight is the night I publish it, and that is a fairer sentence than the one she gave me on the dance floor in September." He nodded slowly. He took the letter, refolded it, and put it inside the front of his waistcoat against his shirt. "It stays with me until the ball," he said. "Not because I do not trust you, because if she has any friend in this house, and she has had servants of mine in her kitchen before now, the letter must not be in any drawer she can have searched. It stays here." "Agreed." "And the father. We must decide today what happens when he comes through the door." They decided it that morning over a breakfast that neither of them ate. Mr. Pierce was called in at 10 and given his orders, including the orders that he should refuse to write any of them down. Mrs. Mallory was called in at 11 and given hers, including the order that there should be coffee for the Reverend Mr. Graves of Sotterley, black and with no sugar, and a closed carriage at midnight to take him back to the parish, and a sealed letter for the curate at Sotterley, explaining that the vicar would be returning a little later than expected, and a little less in funds than he had hoped. The orchestra was sent its processional on the Friday morning. 300 invitations went out, 293 guests accepted. The Harrogate Autumn Ball had not been held for 2 years, and it was held now in the great gallery with the chandeliers full and the orchestra at full strength and the windows open to the cold October air. Lady Thornbury accepted because she had not been disinvited and she could not in good standing refuse. She came in a turban of dark blue with 4 feathers, and she arrived at 9:30 with a small, expectant smile. Cecily wore white. She wore the Harrogate diamonds because Harrogate had put them on her himself in the small drawing room 2 hours before. He had said, "These are not new. They are old. They belong to whoever is the Duchess. They belong to you." She had said, "I do not want them as a costume." He had said, "They are not a costume. They are a fact." She had let him fasten them. The guests were announced. The orchestra played softly. Cecily and Harrogate stood at the head of the gallery and received. Lady Ashworth was in a chair to Cecily's right, because Cecily had asked her to be. The steward, Mr. Pierce, stood at the great doors. The housekeeper, Mrs. Mallory, stood at the foot of the staircase. Both of them had been told what would happen tonight and at which signals. At 10 o'clock, the orchestra stopped. Harrogate stepped forward to the centre of the gallery and the talk dropped because 300 people had been waiting for him to speak. "I have not addressed a room for 2 years," he said. "I will not make a speech tonight. I will make an introduction. Most of you know that I married privately in September. Tonight I should like to present my wife formally to this house and to this company for the first time. Lady Ashworth, will you bring her forward?" Lady Ashworth rose. She took Cecily's hand. She walked Cecily down the length of the gallery as though Cecily were her own granddaughter, which in every way that mattered, in that month, she was. The orchestra began to play a slow processional that Harrogate had asked them to learn. 300 faces watched Cecily walk. Harrogate met her at the centre. "The Duchess of Harrogate," he said to the room. "Cecily." The room reacted in pieces. A name murmured here, an indrawn breath there, a small movement of fans and a long ripple of conversation that surged and broke and surged again. Mrs. Frobisher in the front rank smiled with her eyes shut. Lady Thornbury's smile remained where it had been. It did not move. It also did not warm. A commotion began at the door. Mr. Pierce, the steward, was speaking quietly to a man in a black coat who had not been on the list. The man was perhaps 50, ruddy, unsteady on his feet, and his voice carried across the gallery in the unfortunate way that a drunk man's voice always carries. "I am her father," he was saying. "I am the Reverend Mr. Graves of Sotterley. She is my daughter. Stand aside." 300 heads turned. Cecily did not flinch. She had known he might come. She had not invited him. She had not refused him. She had left the question to the door. "Mr. Pierce," she said across the gallery. Her voice was not loud. It carried because the room was silent. "Show my father to the small library. He may wait there until I am at liberty. Mrs. Mallory will bring him coffee. Black, with no sugar. He does not take sugar." "At once, Your Grace," said Mr. Pierce. "Cecily," her father said. "Cecily, child, look at me. Look at what you have done. Look at what your mother and I made of you." The room held still. "My father," said Cecily very quietly to the room, "did not make this of me. My father is the reason I once wrote a list of 7 proofs that love was a lie. My husband is the reason the list is in the fire. My father will be received in this house tonight as a guest, because he has come uninvited and is in liquor, and because I will not have it said by anyone, including him, that I turned my own father into the street. Mr. Pierce, the small library. Mrs. Mallory, the coffee. There will be a carriage at midnight to take him to the Sotterley vicarage, which I understand he can no longer afford to keep. The debts that would otherwise have lost him the living, my husband has been quietly paying for some months. He may return there with my compliments." There was a sound in the gallery like a wave drawing back from a beach. Mr. Pierce took the Reverend Mr. Graves by the elbow with absolute respect and absolute firmness, and Mrs. Mallory opened the door of the small library, and the Reverend Mr. Graves of Sotterley was removed from his daughter's ballroom on the sole understanding that he would be given coffee. Lady Thornbury had not moved. The expectant smile was gone. Cecily turned to her. "Lady Thornbury." "Your Grace." "You announced at your ball in September that I was the daughter of a country parson. You were correct. You announced that I was the relation of nobody. You were correct in the social sense. You announced that I was the Duke of Harrogate's little experiment. You were incorrect, but you did not know it, and I do not hold a person's incorrect statements against them when they have been honestly made." The room did not breathe. "I should like to be precise tonight about what I did not announce at your ball. I did not announce that I had, in my keeping, a packet of letters my mother kept and never opened. Letters written by women who had asked her for charity over the years. Letters of 2 and 3 pages each, in different hands, from different counties. I did not announce, Lady Thornbury, that one of those letters was from a young woman in Norwich who signed herself Mary Hudson, and who in the year 1801 asked the vicar's wife of Sotterley for the loan of a black gown for her father's funeral, because she had no gown that was not stained and she could not stand at the grave. My mother did not answer the letter. The letter remained in the packet. I have it still." Lady Thornbury's face did not change colour. Her hand at her side opened and closed once. "I do not bring this up tonight, Lady Thornbury, to embarrass you. I bring it up because you announced me out of a ballroom for the sin of having been born to a parson, and I would like you to remember, when you go home tonight, that we were all of us once Mary Hudson asking for a black gown. The letter remains in my keeping. I do not intend to publish it. I only intend you to know that it exists, and that I know it exists, and that this is the last evening on which you will mention my father's parish to anyone in this room or any other. Are we understood?" Lady Thornbury said. "Yes, Your Grace." "Thank you, Lady Thornbury. Mr. Pierce will see that your carriage is sent for. I do not require your company further tonight." Lady Thornbury did not weep. She did not flinch. She had a great deal of practice, which she had not realized she would one day need. She inclined her head a half-inch, and she turned, and she walked the length of the gallery alone. What she was remembering as she walked, and Cecily, watching her go, knew she was remembering it, because Cecily had recognized the walk the moment Lady Thornbury began, was a small wet churchyard in Norwich in October of 1801, and a hired gown the colour of charcoal that did not quite fit her shoulders, and a girl of 17 standing at her father's grave in borrowed clothes, perfectly composed, and not weeping then either. Cecily watched the back of the turban with the 4 feathers in it grow smaller down the gallery, and she did not feel triumph, and she did not feel pity, and she understood in that moment that the 2 of them had been the same girl once, and that one of them had spent 20 years pretending she had not been, and that this was the difference between them, and would remain the difference for the rest of both of their lives. Lady Thornbury went out at the great doors. Her husband, the Earl of Thornbury, who had said nothing during his wife's speech in September, and had not slept properly since, walked 3 paces forward into the silence of the gallery. "Your Grace," he said to Cecily. He bowed deeply. "On behalf of my wife and on behalf of my house, I apologise to you. I should have apologised in September. I did not. I apologise now in front of this company, and I will, if you wish, apologise again tomorrow in writing." "Tomorrow in writing will be sufficient, Lord Thornbury, thank you." He bowed again and went after his wife. The orchestra waited, and the 300 guests waited with it, and Cecily looked at Harrogate. "My husband," she said quietly to the room, "has not danced in a ballroom for 2 years. I should like, if he is willing, to dance with him now. Please continue." The orchestra began. Harrogate took her hand. The room began to move again, slowly, the way a body begins to breathe again after a long held breath, and there was a sound very near to applause that was not quite applause because no one wanted to be the first to clap, and so it was simply a long warm hum of voices saying, "Yes, yes, yes," all down the gallery, and the great chandeliers turned slowly in the draught from the open windows. That night, when the last guest had gone, and the candles had been taken down, and Lady Ashworth had been put in the best guest bedroom with 2 hot bricks, Harrogate and Cecily sat opposite each other in the small drawing-room with a single lamp between them. He had not spoken since the dance. She had not pressed him. He set the lamp aside. He knelt down on the carpet in front of her chair. He took her hands. "I have not said it," he said. "You did not need to. I am saying it now. I love you, Cecily. I have loved you since you walked away from me on the terrace and I had to follow you. I will love you until I am buried, and I will love you after, if there is an after. I will not ask you to say it back tonight. I will not ask you to say it back ever. I am saying it because I want it on the record." She lifted his hands and held them to her cheek. "I love you," she said. "Put it on the record." He laid his forehead on her knee. She put her hand in his hair. They stayed that way for some time. 18 months later, the Duchess of Harrogate was sitting on the floor of the long gallery with her daughter, Helena Eleanor Graves Harrogate, who was a year old and had been named for 2 women by the agreement of her parents, and who at that moment was attempting to put a wooden block into her mother's mouth. Helena Eleanor was not yet a great success at the experiment. Lady Ashworth, who was nearing 80 and used 2 canes now, was watching from a chair by the fire and laughing without opening her mouth. A wooden block escaped Helena Eleanor's grip and skittered across the parquet. Harrogate, coming through the door with a folded paper in his hand, stooped and picked it up. He held it up. "I believe you dropped this," he said. "It is not mine," said Cecily. "It is. The teeth marks match an earlier sample I have on file." Then I confess. He handed the block to Helena Eleanor, who immediately tried to feed it to him. Lady Ashworth from the fire said, "There is a young woman of 19 in Bath, Cecily. She is the niece of a friend. She has not a penny and a great deal of spine, and the sort of mother who married twice and chose poorly both times. She is looking for a place. I thought of you." Cecily looked up from the floor. She looked at Harrogate. He raised one eyebrow a half-inch. "Send her," Cecily said. "We have room." The fire moved. The wooden block went into Helena Eleanor's mouth at last. Through the high windows of the long gallery the autumn light fell long and yellow across the parquet, and somewhere in a small library on the first floor the leather folder marked Sotterly lay quiet in a drawer where neither of them needed to look at it any more. Outside the wind moved in the elms. The list, which Cecily had burned the morning after the autumn ball, had been replaced on her writing desk by a fresh sheet of paper on which she had begun, in her small, steady hand, to write a different list entirely. The new list had only one entry on it so far. It read, "Things that turned out to be true." She had not yet decided what to put underneath. She had time. If this story found a place with you tonight, I should be grateful if you would leave a like for the channel. Tell me in the comments which moment stayed longest in your mind, and subscribe so the next story finds you when it is ready. I will see you in the next one.